There are 30 million working class people in this country. You're sending their money abroad, starving and freezing their elderly, allowing their children to be gang-ard, blown up and murdered, whilst housing and feeding the people that do it. You've told the law-abiding British working class that going to the voting booth doesn't work. You've told them that peaceful protest gets them labelled as far right. You've told them that towing the line, paying your taxes, voting and writing to your MP makes not a shred of difference, whilst you've kneeled like a female dog to a year of BLM rioters and fawning over community leaders, whilst the towns and cities our people built are burnt to the ground and our children are sacrificed to them. I hope this brutal, avoidable, senseless murder of these wonderful little girls is the catalyst for the people of this country to take no more S from you duplicitous, lying, globalist traitors. You said the rioters are all members of the EDL, the English Defence League, an organisation disbanded years ago. And yet you gave a speech where you came out to say you would crush them all.
Let me now turn to the actions of a tiny, mindless minority in our society.
Yes, the people who voted for you. You only got in because most people didn't vote, and they didn't vote because they've given up. 11 million voted for you, 38 million didn't vote for you. You and the Platos in Parliament are the mindless minority in our society. The Nazi Labour Party, the Commie-Servatives, the Lib Shills, people have started to realise that they're all the same and nothing ever gets fixed. You're all establishment shills.
Because in the aftermath of this attack, the community of Southport had to suffer twice. A gang of thugs got on trains and buses, went to a community that is not their own, a community grieving the most horrific tragedy, and then proceeded to throw bricks at police officers who just 24 hours earlier had been having to deal with an attack on children in their community.
BS. Misery-side police are full of Scousers too. They're not from Southport. They're from Liverpool. The riot in Southport was between two sets of Scousers. Plus, there were locals there too, I know there were. There were working class people from Liverpool, Formby, St Helens, Wigan, Preston, Blackburn and Manchester turning up in Southport to show their support. They're all Labour. They're all working class. And though I obviously do not want to see violence on the streets of Southport, I do want to say thank you to all the people who have shown more sympathy over this than the government or the police have. Thank you. And Misery-side police do not care about the citizens of Southport. They don't turn up if your window gets smashed or if your shops get raided. They don't care about the community at all. Their priority is stopping speeding motorists and bar fights at the weekend, not protecting the community. They only defended the mosque so that you could pretend to be on the good side. The state police are there to protect the government, not the people. If you cared so much about Southport, you would form a separate Southport police force. But of course, that'll never happen. Just like you'll never let Southport be free from the vice-like grip of Sefton Council, Sefton Soviet, who have pillaged Southport for all they can get.
And so I've just held a meeting with senior police and law enforcement leaders where we've resolved to show who we are. A country that will not allow understandable fear to curdle into division and hate in our communities, and that will not permit, under any circumstances, a breakdown in law and order on our streets.
Okay, well, there were gangs out on the street, Mr. Starmer. Brandishing knives and machetes, Mr. Starmer. And your officers were doing nothing about it, Mr. Starmer. Why not, Mr. Starmer? why are your officers allowing only one particular group of people to walk the streets with knives and weapons, Mr. Starmer? Could you explain that one to the children, Mr. Starmer? You even marched Antifa out, didn't you, Mr. Starmer? Liverpool patriots refused to fight Antifa. When the police realised their dirty trick didn't work, they marched Antifa away. Be careful, the government police are desperate to blame sovereign British citizens for everything.
Everyone back! Everyone back over here! Don't play their game! Don't play their game! We want violence! Peaceful protesters!
We've seen it time and time again in protests and riots across the Western world when the government brings out the Stalinist forces of hate and division, praises them, and then does everything they can to make their opponents look as bad as they can with their state-run and funded propaganda ministries. And I've got to call your media out on this. Goebbels' Ministry of Enlightenment, the BBC, Sly News, none of these were showing violence caused by one side of the coin. The focus is all on the other side. You were deliberately trying to make out that all of Liverpool was far right, that all of Huddersfield, Hull and Manchester were far right, and that is complete nonsense. So get it through your thick skulls. You're not fighting the far British working class and even some of the middle class as well. In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Here are the so-called anti-fascists being racist towards these Indians. We were provoked and threatened by far-left goons in Cardiff, just 2 of us against around 200. Despite their threats in the presence of police, the officers did nothing to intervene or protect us. We still stood tall and left with dignity. Shame on the 2-tier policing system that clearly shows authorities are unwilling to help those who want to raise their voices against injustice. And let's just listen to this.
Everybody loves me. Everyone loves me now. Fascist gun! Off our street! Fascist gun! Off our street! Fascist gun! Off our street! Fascist gun! They love me! They love me! Fascist gun! They love me! They love me! Fascist gun! Off our street! 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 Where are you going? Fascist gun! Off our street! 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 Fascist gun!
They love me. They do love me.
Fascist gun! Off our street! Fascist gun! Off our streets! Fascist gun! Off our streets!
Antifa are full of racists, and the far left supports the abuse of racial minorities and the mass R-ing and murdering of children, because that's what the left is all about. Racism and the desecration of little girls. And they are so indoctrinated that they can't think. He was told to get off the streets, but when he was walking away, the far left lunatic asked, "Where are you going?" Why? What was he meant to be doing at this point? Was he walking away or not walking away? Getting off the street or not getting off the street? It doesn't make any sense. Plus, Mr. Starmer, these weren't rioting, were they? They were peacefully protesting, Mr. Starmer. And yet they got kicked off the street by the far left, Mr. Starmer. Could you explain any of this, Mr. Starmer?
This was a meeting to pull together our response. A response both to the immediate challenge, which is clearly driven by far-right hatred, but also all violent disorder that flares up, whatever the apparent causal motivation. We make no distinction.
All of it? All of it? Really? You think any of the British people believe you when you say this, Starmer? Because they're not Osama bin Laden.
Crime is crime.
No, it isn't. Not in this country. The state police are racist bigots who judge people by the colour of their skin. This